That's what I thought.
Yeah, at least. All right, welcome, Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football. Dennis Fithian with you here. Always a great time to talk a little college football. That's what we do pretty much every day. It's great to have one of the experts in the field, Phil Steele, with us here on the line, ready to talk a little college football from philsteele.com, the premier college football magazine. Phil, how you doing?
I am doing great, Dennis, and just like to throw out that I appreciate you having me on in the early years of the magazine, some 25 plus years ago, and always look forward to talking to you each and every summer.
Well, Phil, I had a lot more hair back then, and your magazine was black and white, back then. But you've come a long way. You can get it online, and the college football, pro football. I mean, you're everywhere, and you're the best, and it's great. And this year, I remember in past years, it'd always be like, I think Michigan's going to be pretty good. And then I'd ask Phil, and you'd be like, I don't know, but up here, as you might guess, people are really high on Michigan heading into this season. They're excited about Michigan football. We want to know how you feel about Michigan.
Yeah, and I think they deserve to be excited. In fact, I feel this is probably Jim Harbaugh's best team in his 9 years. And you look at all the main contenders for the national title this year, Michigan's probably the one that actually has the veteran quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. And one thing I think we'll see from him this year, Dennis, is that last year he seemed to have some pretty tight reins on him. I think they're going to loosen it up a little bit, let him throw down the field more often. That's going to make their offense even more explosive than last year when they averaged an outstanding 40 points per game. They got my number one set of running backs in the country. I'm on the Joe Moore Award committee, and we love Michigan's offensive line. We've given them the Joe Moore Award each of the last 2 years. And the receiving core looks solid. Defensively, each of the three units ranks in my top 10. Probably if there's one question mark I have with Michigan this year, it would be special teams. They lose their kicker in Brad Robbins. They lose their outstanding, kicker in Jake Moody. Their outstanding punter in Brad Robbins, who had a 39.9 net last year. Have to replace both those. I do like the pickup of James Turner coming in from Louisville. And when I look at the top three teams in the East, it's Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. They're all pretty close power rating wise, but I feel Michigan's got the best schedule. While they do have to play Penn State on the road, they get Ohio State at home, and there's no other landmines really on the Michigan schedule. Meanwhile, Ohio State has got to play Michigan on the road, Notre Dame on the road, Wisconsin on the road, and Penn State, of course, plays Ohio State on the road. They also got a tough game at Illinois, and they draw Iowa over from the West. So of the three teams, the best schedule goes to Michigan. And with Michigan, they go from number 66 on my experience chart all the way up to number 7. I like their chances of not only getting back to the playoff, but actually playing better once the playoff hits this year. A much better bowl experience.
You're answering all my questions right off the bat here. Like Ohio State, they have McCord coming in. He's going to be a first-time starter. I know he's highly thought of in high school. Allard, he got a little bit of run for Penn State, but he's likely, maybe there'll be another guy in there as a first-time starter. So, yeah, JJ coming back. Michigan fans, I know, feel good about that. You said, and Jim Harbaugh said as much, we'll have to wait and see that Michigan is going to throw the ball a little bit more. But McCarthy only threw over 30 times twice. And, he never threw 40 or 50 times like Caleb Williams. How do you evaluate him? I know you rank, the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, all of that's great and so handy and fun to take a look at it. But how did you figure in when you're evaluating and ranking J.J. McCarthy, the junior quarterback at Michigan?
Yeah, I do have McCarthy, the number one QB in the Big Ten this year, coming into the season. And I don't have him. If you look nationally, you're not going to see him up there at the top. And while Coach Harbaugh says they're going to throw the football more, they're not going to be throwing the football 40 times a game. I tell you what, if Michigan's throwing the football 40 times a game, they're not going to be undefeated at the end of the year. They're going to be losing some games where they have to throw the football 40 times a game. I mean, they're built on running the football, having success there. But I do think they will throw more than last year, which means he should top last year's 2,700 yards, probably get over 3,000, probably take a few more deep balls. But I don't think we're going to see like a pass-happy Michigan offense heading into the season. And that's part of the reason that I probably don't have him higher rated in the individual quarterbacks. There's plenty of quarterbacks out there that do play in pass-heavy offensive systems that are probably going to throw for 3,500, 4,000 yards during the course of the year. I think McCarthy will throw more, but I don't see him getting up to that level.
Michigan fans say they want to see a more electric downfield passing game if they do go to that. But when you look at it, you said Michigan averaged over 40 points a game. It was close to being top 5 in the country. And you just talked about all the players that they have coming back. Do you think that, Michigan and Harbaugh has said, look, it's about scoring points, not necessarily how you get there, it's getting there. And I get that. When you look at the other teams in the Big Ten East, Ohio State and Penn State, again, the two teams that are going to be right there with Michigan, each of those teams, they have a tandem backs that can, stand up, and you might say, it could be as good as Michigan's. Do you think that, this Big Ten East could be a throwback? I guess is the question I'm going to ask you, where maybe Ohio State looks to run the ball a little bit more and Penn State looks to act like Michigan a little bit more.
I think both of them will. And when you look at Ohio State, there's no doubt about it. In fact, go back to last year's Ohio State team. They had a Heisman candidate in C.J. Stroud at quarterback, a veteran. They had the best receiving core in the country. And running backs, they were banged up during the course of the year. Remember, Travion Henderson went down to injury. Then Mayan Williams went down to injury. They had Chip Trayanum playing linebacker. They moved him over to running back. He had been a running back at Arizona State, so it's not like it was a new position for him. But he was getting carries late in the year. Despite having 13 tackles on defense, he ended up with 92 yards rushing. Dalen Hayden got effort. This year, they're much better at the running back core. They're healthier in that respect. And now they've got a young quarterback. So you don't want to put the onus on Kyle McCord. Although I'll say this, with Ohio State, at the end of the year, Kyle McCord's going to be one of the top thought of quarterbacks in the country. He's throwing to the best set of receivers. He's going to put up good stats. And whereas Ohio State has had a lot of first-year starting quarterbacks the last 10 years, they've also had probably the top quarterback in the Big Ten 9 of the last 10 years. So McCord's going to have a decent season. It's just early on. I think you'll see them relying on the run game more. And when you're Penn State, why not give the ball to Singleton and Katron Allen? Those are two very potent running backs. And they even add in a running back from Minnesota in Trason Potts. So they are very deep at the running back spot. They've got a solid offensive line, and they're working in a young quarterback. So I think you will see both Ohio State and Penn State run the football more this year.
We've got the great Phil Steele with us. We'll tell you where to go out, and you can stay home and just order it from your house. But if you want to go out and get it, we'll tell you where to go coming up in just a minute or two. I want to go back to Michigan. You talked about McCarthy being the best quarterback in the Big Ten. I know you break down the individual units. Let's talk about Michigan's offense. Do you like their offensive line? Any of the other skill groups up there when you started ranking some of the best individual units across the country?
Yeah, and talking offense, naturally being on the Joe Moore Award Committee, we're very familiar with Michigan's offensive line, having given them the award 2 straight years, the first time ever Joe Moore 2-time award winner for the offensive line. I rate Michigan's offensive line number 2 in the country again this year, so they're right at the top. They do lose 2 starters, but they got 3 starters back, and they add in 3 full-time starters. I mean, they didn't just bring in some transfers. They brought in Drake Nugent coming in from Stanford, who had 12 starts in 2021, 12 more starts last year. They bring in Ladarius Henderson, who over from Arizona State. He was a 3-year starter there. Last year, he only started the first 6 games, but then was out for the year with injury. And they also bring in Miles Hinton from Stanford, another 2-year starter, 9 and 7 starts each of the last 2 years. He missed some time due to injury. So they've got plenty of depth there. You got a player like Trente Jones, who you could classify him as a starter. He started 6 games at right tackle last year, and yet he's one of the backups, as is Giovanni El Hadi, a guy that started 3 games as a redshirt frosh last year. You could count him as a starter. So it's an extremely deep offensive line, and I rate it number 2 in the country. And then let's look at the running back core. Blake Corum is back. Now, if he's 100% healthy, look out. And remember, Donovan Edwards wasn't 100% last year, but still ran for 991 yards, 7.1 yards per carry. They got a guy like Ben Hall, who was very impressive in the spring game, a number 36 rated running back coming out of high school as a true frosh. They got C.J. Stokes, who ran for 273 yards last year. They got Cole Cabana, my number 19 rated running back coming out of high school, Kyle Mullins, who moved over from linebacker last year. And we remember how that linebacker to running back moved a couple of years ago. So it's an extremely deep running back core. I actually rate it the best running back core in the entire country. So, yes, J.J. McCarthy's got some good supporting cast to go with him.
Phil, you could work in Ann Arbor. What are you talking about? Going across the country. Phil Steele's College Football 23 Preview Magazine is out. You mentioned that we call it the Sharon Moore Award. You mentioned the Joe Moore Award. What's it like? Take us into the meeting rooms. What kind of data points? How many people are there? What are the conversations like when you're trying to judge the best unit, offensive line unit in the country?
And it's interesting, Dennis, that I am actually the only non-offensive lineman or ex-offensive lineman and non-offensive line coach or ex-offensive line coach on the committee. So, I'm in there with these big old boys, and it's one of the hardest working committees out there. I come in there with the numbers and the stats and comments from the coaches and things like that. That's what I contribute to the group. And these guys just talk ball. They talk offensive line and they break down film. Hey, I don't like, I loved watching them last night. I broke them down for 3 hours, but their right guard, and they never met an offensive line they truly love. They're always going to critique something. But this is a hard-working committee that actually does break down film on every single offensive line. I can narrow it down to 20, and then they start breaking down the film on it. And it's one of the awards I'm most proud to be on.
Well, Michigan fans like the way you guys in the direction that you went the last 2 years. And, considering that they're right up there at the top, maybe they could go 4-3 in a row. If you're looking for the magazine out there, philsteele.com, you can go right there. You can find that on Twitter. I did notice, Phil, I don't even know if you know that you're available also on Threads, a part of Instagram right now. You've got that rivalry going on, and you're a part of that. I was one of the first followers there for Phil Steele on Threads. And then you can always go out to Barnes & Noble as well. And if you want to pick up your Phil Steele College Football Preview Magazine, that's the way you go about and do it. Anything else that I missed there about the magazine? I know you can get it online as well.
Yeah, if you get it at Barnes & Noble, that's probably your best bet because they've got them. They've got them on location right now. You can go pick it up and have it in your hands. But I'll say this, if you order it at philsteele.com, you would get the hard copy. Now, it's an extra cost because we have to mail it out. Of course, shipping costs. We just pass the shipping cost on to you. However, when you order the hard copy at philsteele.com, we give you the digital version for free. So you could actually be reading the digital version while you're waiting for that to come in. And the digital version gets updated all the way through September. So whenever Northwestern figures out who their head coach is, boom, the next day we'll have that on the page. Instead of Northwestern with Pat Fitzgerald with a circle around his name, we'll have the actual head coach for Northwestern on the page. And if anybody gets lost out for the year in the month of August, we circle them on the pages as well. So you get both the hard copy and the digital at philsteele.com.
Yeah, and then sometimes, Phil, if people go out and take a picture with their Phil Steele, you'll actually retweet them. I've seen that. That's fun. Seeing people out at the beach or up in the mountains or whatever else on Twitter retweeting that they just got their magazine. Well, we've talked all offense. We know the other side of the ball. I was surprised. I don't know about you last year. Michigan had a really good defense in 21, but they had some really high-end guys like Aiden Hutchinson, who was picked number 2 overall. David Ajabo would have been number 1. Dax Hill was a first-round pick as well. That's a lot of high-end talent that Michigan had to replace last year. And yet the surprise is that statistically they were even better, just giving up over 16 points a game last year in total points. That's one of the top defenses in the country. Do you think they can keep that up this year?
I do think they can. And like you said, I would have expected a little regression from Michigan last year. Rather surprised, 16.1 points per game and 292 yards per game, and only 3.3 yards per game as well. When I look at them this year, they do lose some players up front. Mike Morris was a number 5 draft pick. DJ Turner at cornerback was a number 2 DC. Of course, Mozzie Smith was the number 1 draft pick. So they lose some key guys off the defense, but I like the replacements coming in. A guy like Josiah Stewart comes in from Coastal Carolina. And while last year he didn't have a huge year, he had 12 and a half sacks at Coastal Carolina in 21. I think it's going to give them a nice addition as far as the pass rush goes. The linebacking core last year was extremely inexperienced. They had practically nobody back. This year, they've got Sandra still, who, by the way, was a wide receiver that moved to defense last year, and I thought got better by the week. They've got Colson and Barrett there at the linebacker spot, so I'm pretty high on the linebacker unit being much more experienced this year. They do lose 3 key starters in the secondary, a little bit of a question mark, but they've replaced those starters recently and done well, so I still have them rated. Defensive line, I rate number 6 in the country. Linebackers, number 5 in the country. Defensive backs, number 7 in the country. I think Michigan's going to have a pretty good defense.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I don't know if you have this data point, but Jesse Minter, who is this now his second year as defensive coordinator, you got to put him number 1 in the country in halftime adjustments, because whatever Michigan was doing and coaching there, they came out and they proved that in the second half last year. Well, Phil, how do you see the Big Ten? I don't know if you break down who's going to be in the Big Ten championship game from Big Ten East, from Big Ten West. Do you feel like Michigan is going to be there for a 3rd year in a row, which would be obviously music to Michigan fans' ears?
Yeah, I think when you look at the East this year, Dennis, it's a 3-team race. You've got Michigan, you've got Ohio State, you've got Penn State, and of the 3 teams, Michigan's the only one with the veteran quarterback, and Michigan also has the best schedule. You look at the non-conference slate, East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, who they draw from the West, which is Nebraska and Minnesota and Purdue. All that falls into the favorable category, and getting the big game at home, I think, is huge. Plus, Michigan's going to go into that game with a lot of confidence, having beaten Ohio State 2 of the last 3 years, and Jim Harbaugh's 2-1 against Ryan Day. With Ohio State, I actually had them rated number 2 in my power poll in the front of the magazine, but they have to play Notre Dame on the road. They have to play Wisconsin on the road. They have to play Michigan on the road, as well as a home game against Penn State. And that Penn State game actually comes the week before they have to travel and face Wisconsin. So a pretty tough schedule for Ohio State, a team that, by the way, was a missed field goal away from winning the national title last year. And then Penn State, I think this is James Franklin, one of his best teams, clearly. And they need to break through against the big boys. You remember last time Michigan traveled to Happy Valley and needed that late score to pull out the win. They've got to travel to Happy Valley again this year. That makes Penn State a contender. But I do feel Michigan has the talent and the schedule to win the East, and they are my pick to win the East this year. Now, the West, I believe, will be, as opposed to the East being a 3-team race, I think that the West will be a 2-team race this year between Wisconsin and Iowa. I love the talent in Iowa, and I got to be honest, when Cade McNamara hit the transfer portal, Dennis, the first thing that popped in my mind was go to Iowa. Perfect fit. Guess what? He lands at Iowa, and not only lands there, brings over a guy your listeners are very familiar with, in Eric All. And, Iowa and tight ends, they do extremely well. I think that's a match made in heaven. And while people say, hey, Iowa has a stodgy offense, they can't win there, keep in mind, they averaged 17 points per game. They averaged 17 points per game last year. 2 years ago, they averaged 32 points per game. So they can do it with that offense. And I think the pickup of McNamara and All and that offensive line, they're going to be in pretty good shape. Defensively, Phil Parker's still there, one of the best defenses in the country and one of the best special teams. The only reason I didn't pick them to win the West, they have to play both Penn State and Wisconsin on the road. And when you get to Wisconsin, you're talking about my number 1 surprise team in the country. Wisconsin is a team that was just 7-6 last year, and I was skeptical. Luke Fickell coming in, are they going to throw the football all over the yard because they're bringing in Phil Longo? They're bringing in SMU quarterback and Tanner Mordecai. And guess what? I talked to Coach Fickell. Yes, they're going to throw the football more, but he feels while throwing the football more, it's going to open up the running lanes for Braylon Allen and Ches Maluzzi, 2 of the better running backs in the country. They have a big veteran offensive line. Defensively, they go from 3 starters back to 8 starters back this year. And then you look at the schedule. Look at the road trips. Washington State, Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota all fall in the winnable category. They get Iowa at home. They get Ohio State at home. My surprise team is a non-top 10 team that I think can contend for a playoff spot. Wisconsin's that team this year.
Wow. Phil, I've got 2 quick questions for you here at the end. Of course, I can talk to you for a couple hours, but what about the college football playoff? This is the last year that they're going to have 4 before they go to 12 if everything goes as planned. I got some feedback coming in for you. Montrell is saying the way Harbaugh runs the offense, it's not a championship offense, not in this era. Well, the last 2 years, Michigan got to the college football playoff. They should have beat TCU last year. I don't think anybody thought they were going to beat Georgia, but, they were, I guess, in with a chance. Do you think Michigan, if they get to the college football playoff, do you think they are going to get there? And do you think that they could advance and possibly win it?
I do have them getting the playoff this year, and I do believe if there's a window for Michigan to do it, this is the year. And once again, of all the main contenders that you're looking at the top of the charts, they're the only one with the veteran quarterback coming into the season. They've got 2 years of playoff experience under their belt, and many times we've seen the jump. So I do give Michigan an excellent chance this year of actually breaking through and winning it.
All right. Okay. Great answer, Phil. Nice job. How about with the Heisman? You had Blake Corum. I think he had a shot last year if he doesn't get hurt against Illinois. He was running wild in the first half. Who knows what he would have done in the second half? But his counterpart went crazy at Ohio State. So I don't know. He had a shot to come up and win the Heisman. But you got Donovan Edwards. You've got J.J. McCarthy. How do you handicap the Wolverines' chances, that trio, of possibly breaking through and winning the big hardware?
Yeah, like you said, I think if Blake Corum played the second half against Illinois and had a big game against Ohio State, he might just have won the Heisman Trophy last year. So it's an opportunity for him to do it again this year. I hope he's 100%. I hope he looks like in the same form that he did last year, coming off the injury that he is. But he's definitely has that capability. I'd say J.J. McCarthy has a capability. If they're going to throw the football more, he can get up there, take it from like 2,700 yards, maybe 3,500 yards, and Michigan being successful. Let's face it, the Heisman Trophy is not necessarily the best player in the country. It's the best player on the best team in the country. And if Michigan is standing undefeated at the end of the year, they clearly all have a Heisman candidate.
Well, that's the idea. That's the plan. And it looks like, according to you in your magazine, that they do have a shot. Well, Phil, it's always great for you to give us a few minutes and talk some college football. Tell everybody, again, philsteele.com. You can find that. There's a link right there on Twitter. Go to Barnes & Noble. And don't forget, like Phil talked about, you get that hard copy. You can also sign up and get the digital part as well, which would be awesome for everyone. Phil, I know you're a busy man. It's like college football season is here for you, with you talking about it every day. And before long, it actually will be. Thanks for your time.
Hey, Dennis, appreciate you having me on as always. And once again, thanks for having me on for 25 years or so on your show. I look forward to it each and every summer.
Here's to another 25, Phil. Take care.
Let's do it.
There he is. Thank you, Phil Steele. Phil Steele, College Football Magazine. He gets you. We sit here almost every day talking about college football, but you just get maybe a national guy on, somebody else, get some enthusiasm talking about college football. And well, Phil, you see the magazine and then you talk to him, how much time he spends watching games, talking about college football. And it's just one of those things nice to be able to hear what he thinks about the Maize and Blue and their chances. And let's say if you're just joining us, Phil feels pretty good about Michigan's chances. You feel pretty good about Michigan's chances, although I'm looking over on the feedback. There was some, Jim's got to get out of the 80s mindset and all this. Like, hey, I guess, Montrell, you have not been paying attention to this show, and you did not, I think that's like I don't know if it's a national narrative or like Jim's just running the football. Michigan, with J.J. McCarthy last year, was trying to unleash a downfield passing game. And J.J., to be honest, he was not connecting. He was not on the same page in a lot of the games with his wide receivers until the second quarter against Ohio State, when he found Cornelius Johnson backing out on a third down, throwing the ball over, and, Kojo did the rest. But then he found him again. And then he found Colston Loveland for a big one in the second half. And then he was running one in, and then he had it. And then it clicked in. He broke that seal. And Michigan is going to have a more dangerous passing game. They have underrated wide receivers, I think, led by Roman Wilson. You could say led by Cornelius Johnson. I would also put Colston Loveland, the aforementioned, who's freshman tight end, as one of those, John Harbaugh. They got Mark Andrews. They don't have a whole lot of wide receivers. Their number one target is Mark Andrews. I'm not ready to say he's Travis Kelce, but he is like Dallas Goedert there for the Eagles. He is a pass catching tight end, wide receiver. So Michigan has the hands and the capability. And now late in the year, they found that. And I would expect them to deliver the ball more downfield and be able to do that. But it always gets back. You can talk about 80s all you want. I would look at that if I was a Michigan fan as a compliment, because the one thing that you can do is go out there and control your clock, control the clock. That helps the defense. You can go out there and run and punish the opposing defense. You control the game. You're more physical, and it really takes its toll mentally and obviously physically when you're out there actually punching them in the mouth. And so being able to do that and being able to have that passing game, I don't agree with you, Montrell, that, Michigan can only get so far. I think the ceiling, and 2 years ago, if you'd have told me that against Georgia, it kind of felt like that. Like, Michigan was like a, Georgia light. It sounds a little disrespectful, but Georgia, just with all the talent that they had, and they kind of attacked the game the same way. But last year, do I think Michigan would have been a little bit better if they would have beat TCU against Georgia? I do. I think they would have played a closer game. And what's happened with Georgia and Alabama, yeah, they're good. You even call them great. But Michigan this year, with name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal, all of the players that they were able to retain, the Blake Corums, the Keegans, the Zinters on the offensive side, heck, Cornelius Johnson, Chris Jenkins, Mike Sainristil, some of these guys, almost all of them maybe, previous to NIL, and have been in the NFL. Michigan's got all of that talent, and what that says to me is that they've pulled up. They're right there with Georgia. I think they can look Georgia in the eye. I think they have that kind of talent where just 2 years ago I'd have said, Michigan, I don't know if this, I think the ceiling was the semifinal. Last year I thought the ceiling was the championship game. And then you never know. You get in with a chance. Look at what TCU did. But this year, I think the ceiling is, as Michael Jordan would say, the roof. It's there. They can do it. I don't think anything's going to hold them back. I think you're holding yourself back, or you're listening to people that just have the blinders on. And it's all right. People sometimes, blinders, I don't know if I say blinders are fun. No, they're not. Take the blinders off, Montrell. Let's go. Let's do it. I'll take some feedback in here on a Tuesday. I'm fired up. You get Phil Steele here on here talking college football. We'll see what some of the folks have to say. Wolverine fan says Penn State's best chance to win the Big Ten will be next year when Aller has a year under his belt and Michigan probably will have a new starting quarterback. Yeah, well, Penn State was really good last year. Like when I watched them in the Rose Bowl, they looked fabulous. They looked really good, except against Ohio State, and especially in the second half, and against Michigan in the second half. Pretty good, except against Ohio State and Michigan. Shadyville says J.J. McCarthy also needs to run more. I think that in selective games that J.J. McCarthy will run more. I thought J.J. McCarthy should have run a little bit more. He should have started taking off a little bit more in the semifinal. And he started taking off more in the second half, and it looked pretty good. JJ was masterful in the second half. If you go back, I watch it so much. Here's Stroud complaining about a call. I don't think he had. I think that the coverage was good. But my point about McCarthy in the second half is that you watch him when he rolls out, when he decides to run the ball, he'll run for 9 and slide down. He'll run for 7. He'll get out of bounds, maybe with a little escorted with a little bit of shove, a shove by the defender. He had it. That's what you want to see from J.J. McCarthy, like in the second half, with the wheels, with the arm, running the offense, more comfortable. And in the second year, I think you will see a little bit more from McCarthy. He's going to be a better he was really good last year. He's going to be a better quarterback this year. I mean, more reps, second year, a full spring. Remember, he didn't even, the year before, he couldn't throw because of the shoulder situation. And now here he is. You could make a case that he'll be way better than he was as a sophomore. So I think that what you're looking for there is an improved J.J. McCarthy, and I think he will take off. Antoine checks in and says Michigan's offense is good. We just got to tweak it. When things get tired, when they get tired of pounding, drop the safety, that's when we got to make them pay. That's it. That's it, Antoine. You get those safeties. They can't stop the one-armed bandit. They can't stop Blake Corum. They got all these guys in the box. That's when JJ just puts that ball on his hip after a little play action. Guys are running down the field. Roman Wilson, touchdown. Colston, if they got that coverage over there, well, then you got Colston Loveland. You get down to the red zone, you got Cornelius Johnson. Yeah, I know. If you want to tell me that, this is going to be the time for Darius Clemens or Tyler Morris, I'm not going to argue with you, but I think the offense is pretty good. Count 22 is saying that Aller is a statue. Growing pains this year. I was watching him run a little bit. Oh, here's a big Buckeye Garrison. Hey, what's going on, BBG? He says Aller is actually very mobile. If you just look at him, the dude's like 6'5", and you kind of say, wow, he looks like Andrew Luck. It's kind of the way, that's what I thought when I first saw him. And then I watched him, and, a little bit he came in against Michigan last year, remember? And then, I watched him in the spring game. You see him, and, so you don't expect like Andrew Luck to be, but he is. He's got some athleticism to him, but you just expect a 6'5" QB to just be a pocket passer and just zipping it in there. And I think he does have a little bit more athleticism than Account 22 is talking about. Here's Montrell again. Wide receiver development. It shouldn't be no way that CJ had 30-something catches last year. Yeah, I think, again, Montrell, you've missed it this year. Michigan's secret weapon, Roman Wilson, is way undervalued by everybody across the country and Michigan fans. Roman Wilson is a star. He's one of the, Ohio State's got the two best wide receivers. They got the best wide receiving room in the country. Roman Wilson could be a second-round pick this year. I mean, the guy's the fastest wide receiver in the country. He hauls in a couple of those passes where he had like 4 or 5 steps on the DBs last year. The conversation's way different. Kojo, he's got all the measurables that you're looking for, and he came up big against Ohio State. Now, if he had low numbers and he didn't come up big in the big games, you'd say a little too inconsistent. But I like where Cornelius Johnson's at. You listen to him talk, and you think, this is the kind of guy that I root for his entire life. You love a guy like Cornelius Johnson. I could see him having a big year. Look, Michigan's coming off an undefeated season, and they look like they can hit all of the points and even exceed them from last year. I mean, this team is going. So, yeah, I mean, I know you pinprick a little bit like, oh, I'm a little bit worried about the wide receiver development. Okay, you could be worried about that. I'm not worried about that. The kicker, James Turner, sure, special teams. Turner kicked for 3 years down at Louisville, and he only made 1 kick over 50 yards. So that is a concern. He was 1 for 6 on kicks over 50. But when you get inside the 50, 87%. Very good numbers. You get down inside the 40, 97%. Talking about Turner in his 3 years with Louisville. He's money inside the 50. What's Michigan going to do outside the 50? Maybe that's where the Samaha, the freshman kicker, or Cordell Jones of the preferred walk-on comes in. Maybe those guys got the leg to really boom it. But I think instead of being worried about place kicking, I think you zero in on it and saying you're worried about 50 plus. 50 plus. Or as my friend John always says, Just worry about kicking extra points. Just get it into the end zone. They do have the walk-on from Mississippi State. He could factor in the long kicks. I don't know. He came out of high school as a highly touted punter and kicker, and then he didn't kick it all at Mississippi State. So we don't know. He's kind of a wild card. Hell, he could be, if Tommy Doman in a pinch, maybe he could be the punter. You can make a case, or maybe he could be that, long range guy. I don't know what kind of leg he has. We'll wait and see on that. But I do know that Turner, it's not like they're just going out there and saying, hey, it's going to be a Keystone Cop type situation. Turner kicked for 3 years for the Cards, and he's a hell of a good kicker from 50 and in. That's not bad. Not bad. If you're riding on, if it, you need a 55-yarder, in, I don't know, when was the first time you think they're going to need a 55-yarder? At Nebraska in the second half, then we're going to find out who it's going to be. Who's going to be that long kicker? I'll see. All right. Well, that's where I'm at. Join us tomorrow when, guess what? We'll talk more Michigan football as we do here on the Maize and Blue Review. I would like to remind everyone that if you are out there and tuning in for the first time, we're here a couple times a week. And then also we're all the time. We're on the Maize and Blue Review on the Den, on the posting board. And you can join up and be a part of all of that by going to michigan.rivals.com. You want to know about the latest in recruiting, the transfer portal, what's going on with some practice news, latest intelligence when it comes to recruit. We got that. That's what Josh Henschke is doing right now. Trevor McHugh, Seth Berry, it goes on and on. Brock Heilig taking care of business over there. Nice staff, nice place to come and visit and talk to Michigan all day and all night. And so we will see you over there, and we'll see you here tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Thanks to you for joining us, and thanks to Phil Steele for coming on. Everybody have a great day. See you later.